I think there's just been a lot of unearned confidence. I think that they misread why they won the 2020 election. I think that people thought that, oh, Biden tried this message on democracy and Donald Trump being a threat to our norms in that election, and he won, so that means that there's something to it. Well, I think that there was an economic crisis in 2020 that people kind of blame Trump for, and there are other things
I don't
going
think
on.
most
I
hooligans.
think that we see very clearly now.
Hello, hello, hello,
Hey,
hello. Can you hear me?
yeah.
What's up, Osita? Do you have your camera on or no?
Let me see if I can switch it on. Yep. One sec.
Perfect. Is still loading. Oh, boom. There it
There we
is.
go.
Okay.
How's it going?
It's going all right. It's just going, you know? It
It's
is what
just
it
going.
is. Osita, thank you so much for coming. We are going to be doing the real autopsy of a failed campaign here
Oh,
today on the broadcast. I earlier had Ested Hearn talk about, some of these issues. And I wanted to continue talking to you about them as well, because there were a couple things that you said throughout the campaign that I heavily agreed with. I had also said that I think are very prescient. I also want to look at some of the silliest aspects of the consultant class desperately trying to run defense for their own, in order to preserve their own careers, and also their ideological third way neoliberal positions overall. But one thing I want to start off with is by talking about your take on specifically institution defenders and civility.
yeah.
I don't have the exact tweet here, but I remember you tweeting something about specifically the obvious reality that many people are suffering financially in the United States of America and have no interest in preserving the legacy or the integrity of these institutions, and as a matter of fact want to blow it up. And I agree with you on that.
Yeah, yeah, that's a lesson I think we should have learned from 2016. I think people are just getting it now. I don't think it should have taken another Trump victory to bring us to that point. But look, the bulk of the Biden campaign, before he dropped out, and the bulk of the Harris campaign were both focused on this idea that Donald Trump is a novel threat to American institutions, that he was going to come in, bust up our norms, bust up our democracy, lead us to authoritarianism. And the right thing to do was join together with people we disagree with, like Liz Cheney, and sort of create this popular front against this guy who was such a threat to politics as it should be, politics as it used to be. Um, I think that that is a message that appeals to some people. It appeals to Democrats and liberals. It appeals to some moderates. It appeals to people who read The Atlantic. Um, but if that were a compelling enough driver of public opinion at this point, Donald Trump wouldn't have won the election in 2016 in the first place. And as we see now, he wouldn't have won this time around either. I mean, people came into this election without any kind of illusions about who Donald Trump was. They didn't need to be told by Kamala Harris that he was violating American norms. But the reality is that there are people in America um, who don't really see any reason to believe that politics in Washington works, that we have a democracy in the first place, that ordinary people can have their say in. I think a lot of people in America believe that, as bad as January 6th was and as bad as trying to steal the election was, it's not like wealthy people don't already get what they want in Washington over and above what ordinary people want anyway. So what's the difference? I think there's a lot of cynicism. And the Democrats never came up with a message, I think, that spoke to that very obvious reality. I'm not saying that's like most people in the country, but certainly it's some of the people who are hurting economically in this country, and in raw political terms, it's some of the voters who mattered the most for the purposes of winning the Electoral College. So, I think that people are only now coming to terms with the fact that there are people who don't respond to a kind of civics class representation of American politics and what American politics should be. People are tired of ordinary politicians. They're tired of hearing the same homilies over and over again. They're tired of being told that Washington works well and that there are good people there and they're just doing their better. They're tired of all that. And they react to that in all kinds of ways. There's some people who react to that by joining up with the American left, people who like Bernie Sanders and who read, the things that you and I read. But there are people who are going to respond to that in different ways, right? And if you don't speak to that constituency, I don't think you can be too surprised that elections aren't going to work out the way that you expect. The norm stuff can only go so far, and I think the Democrats are kind of at the end of their rope on it.
The norm stuff can only go so far if people feel the norms are benefiting them and the institutions are actually, when they're working fine, are defending their best interest. And large swaths of Americans understandably do not feel that way and have very openly communicated that the first time around in 2016. And not necessarily just in the general election where Donald Trump defeated Hillary Clinton, but also in the primary where the Democratic Party's base out of nowhere said Hillary Clinton, an establishment figurehead, was so like the worst person for the time that they were willing to go out and vote for an old Jewish man who had said he was a socialist since the fucking 40s. Like, it wasn't just Bernie's incredibly successful message that carried him to surprising victories in the primary early on. It was actually the fact that people just despised Hillary Clinton. Like, he didn't activate out of nowhere a lot of Americans who were like, oh my God, I'm a card-carrying socialist. There's still a lot of resentment towards that sort of thing due to Red Scare propaganda like that. This is the United States of America, We're not a socialist country, we're a capitalist country. But that's how much they fucking hated Hillary Clinton. So the nothing will fundamentally change campaign from Joe Biden was like shocking. But I guess expected from the Democrats because they just have this inability, this refusal to reckon with the reality, and they would rather die graceful winners and I think consistently champion their ideological project that has died at this point, died time and time again, instead of offering concessions to populist left-wing economics and maybe even offend their donor class, their corporate benefactors.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's right. I think there's just been a lot of unearned confidence. I think that they misread why they won the 2020 election. I think that people thought that, Biden tried this message on democracy and Donald Trump being a threat to our norms in that election, and he won, so that means that there's something to it. Well, I think that there was an economic crisis in 2020 that people kind of blamed Trump for, and there are other things going on. I think that we see very clearly now, actually, that message probably is not what won the election for them in 2020. They believe that anyway, to the point where
can I stop you there for a second? Sorry to interrupt, but there was one other thing that Joe Biden did that Kamala Harris didn't do, which was communicate counter narratives against Trumpian policy that was objectively unpopular at the time due to like relentless media attacks and relentless attacks from the Democrats. Joe Biden ran on amnesty for migrants living on U.S. soil in the first 100 days. He ran on ending the camps. Now, of course, he didn't do any of that, but he was one of the few candidates that actually never tacked to the center, but instead ran to the left in the aftermath of the primary process.
Yeah. I mean, I think he's the only candidate that I can think of who began their general election further to the left than they were when they started their primary. You're supposed to move to the center. That's conventional wisdom in politics. You're supposed to move to the center after the primary. Once you deal with the base, then you deal with the general electorate. And he was criticized for that, I think, all throughout that campaign. I remember when the Floyd protests started, people were on him to Sister Soldier, Black Lives Matter, and don't just denounce violence, just talk about how progressive activists suck and are bad. And he didn't really do that. So I think there are a lot of different lessons that we can learn from 2020. But I think that the one that won out for Democratic policy professionals is, well, this message about Donald Trump being a threat to our political institutions is the thing that really resonated. I think that they saw success, in midterm elections, and midterm elections electorate is very different. I don't know. I feel like, they were so confident that this was going to work that they're willing to put Biden forward as he was falling apart visibly before
Yeah.
our eyes, you know. Um, and I think that speaks to the level of solipsism that exists within democratic policy circles. So I don't know. I'm curious as to whether we actually see any kind of real reckoning here. You're hearing interesting things from David Brooks, who is very belatedly
Yeah.
talking about Bernie Sanders. So I don't know if that's real. I don't know if it goes anywhere. I would not be surprised at all if we just put up the same house of cards again. But I do think that more and more people outside of the Democratic professional class know what's what here and understand that trying to resurrect the defining mode of politics that shaped the Democratic Party since at least the Obama years, um, that's not going to work. It's not going to work reliably. I mean, maybe it carries you in a midterm election, under Trump or whatever. But when you talk about the need to reconstruct a governing majority here, Donald Trump is now presiding over a majority Republican Party. If the popular vote result holds, and I think it will, that is an existential crisis of the Democratic Party, and I think it forces everybody, or it should force everybody, to go back to the drawing board.
Yeah. I think one of the things that I've seen, aside from the funny David Brooks quote that you mentioned already, which is like, we got to do left wing Bernie style economic populism, what the fuck, is the Democratic Party's consultant class and their desperation in immediately rushing to every mainstream television outlet that will have them and screaming from the rooftops that the mistakes of the party and the mistakes of the campaign were simply that they did not, and this might shock you, Osita, go right enough.
Yeah.
The most right wing campaign from a Democratic Party that I have seen ever, really, where they conceded on this idea, this false notion that immigrants constitute a national security threat. Kamala Harris ran on being tough on the border. She rarely ever brought up trans people. And when she was forced to answer on it, she basically said, like, well, the law is the law. There was a
Right.
point where the Kamala HQ literally was like, well, Trump is not killing trans people either.
Yeah.
Do with that information what you will. Routinely saying she wants a Republican in the cabinet and only talking about focus group messaging of over means tested policies that were inherently neoliberal, that were either tax cuts or deregulation. And that made me lose my mind, that she was like outflanking Joe Biden on being progressive. Joe Biden, for all of his faults and failures and being a genocidaire, had one of the most left-wing, anti-corporate, economic populist administrations I have seen in my lifetime, if not the most, as a matter of fact. And Kamala Harris did not do that due to, I guess, Tony West, her brother-in-law. But it's, I guess, both unsurprising but still very maddening to hear these Democratic consultants lie about what the campaign didn't do. Hitting the true centrist attack to the center has not been tried yet, like the idiotic takes. So I don't know. I don't feel very confident in seeing a different attitude from the Democratic Party in spite of this resounding defeat.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, the same familiar voices are trotting out the same familiar prescriptions. I don't know how much further right they could have gone without just being Republicans straight up. Maybe they should have
said
said,
slurs.
actually, Donald Trump was right to try to steal the 2020 election. I don't know, like what more could they have done? I mean, the thing I've been thinking about too is, we're seeing these polls. There's a YouGov poll about, how Biden would have done if he had stayed in the race, and like Trump was ahead by like 7 points. And I'm thinking to myself, like, if this is the pivot to the right conversation we're having now, what if Biden had stayed in and did even worse? Like, what would the pivot to the right conversation be like then? Would you have Democratic electeds just like volunteering to drive immigrants to the camps? Like, what, like, at a certain point, you have to just touch reality here. This was a moderate campaign, extraordinarily disciplined moderate campaign. There was not a single thing that she could have done differently without just becoming a Trumpian Republican. To be more of a kind of doctrinaire centrist. I think one of the things I remember the most was like every time she was asked about being a woman and like being the first female president, she'd be like, no, 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 no. Like I think I'm a woman, but yeah, I'm also an American. And she was like on the ball, doing all of the things that you're supposed to do. Is kind of like an anti-woke
Yeah.
uh, centrist,
And they
on every
celebrated
respect.
it.
Talking about owning a gun,
They
talking about the most
celebrated it.
lethal military.
They were like, enough,
So
because Joe Biden killed wokeness, first of all. Like, everybody talks about that, but like, you had an 800-year-old white dude who worked with segregationists for most of his fucking career. He had already killed wokeness. He wasn't going to do like, NGO academia language. Like, he is physically incapable of doing that. And also simultaneously, he still was like defensive over trans people, which was good. That at least 3 quote comes to mind always. Like the Turning Point USA troll comes up to him and he's like, Mr. President,
yeah.
like how many genders are there? And he's like, at least 3.
At least 3, yeah.
He did a pretty decent job at that sort of thing. But there was no like annoying pandering like corporate speak at all. And Kamala Harris is not a white woman like Hillary Clinton was, so she did not have that same level of arrogance that she could like run on her identity alone in the way that Hillary Clinton did. No, I'm with her messages were ever displayed, because I think Kamala Harris, being a black woman, knows, most Americans are not going to be like, oh, you're a black woman? That's awesome. I'm definitely going to vote for you now.
Right. I think that part of the campaign was like, it made sense. But like, I think the point is, she did everything that she was supposed to do from a moderate perspective.
Yeah.
And it didn't work. Her best polls of the campaign came right at the very beginning when she came into the race. Before there was like a huge policy platform, before she did all this moderate stuff, the only thing people knew about Kamala Harris at that point is that she was a non-white woman from liberal California, right? And that she was not Joe Biden. And that was the best period of the campaign for her. And as soon as she tries to start developing this kind of like woke or the moderate, kind of anti, whatever we want to call it, approach to replicate the Biden approach, the race starts narrowing. I want to say that it's because she moved to the center, but it clearly wasn't enough to prevent Trump from rising.
I can say that. I will say that.
Yeah,
you don't have to say.
I'm being very generous.
I'm saying that.
I think I've written about in my column today on the election is there was never enough moderation. Like real moderation has never been tried from the perspective of Democratic consultants. This idea of creating a more centrist Democratic Party is not a novel idea. It is not something that we have to create from scratch and has never been tried before. I'm still kind of old enough to remember the early Obama years, right? So Obama comes into office in 2009 with the Democratic governing majority that includes Democratic senators from Alaska and Arkansas and Nebraska and North Dakota. The reason why people have been talking about this over the course of this election, the reason why they didn't codify Roe under Obama, even though he said he was going to, because at that point there were so many more pro-life centrists in the Democratic Party, right, that they couldn't pass that. You had the Blue Dog coalition, right, in the House, so all of these moderates and all of these kind of like swingy districts. There was a more centrist Democratic Party 15 years ago, right in the years before Trump came onto the scene. And over the course of Obama's presidency, all those candidates get wiped out, basically, in midterm elections and in the congressional side of the presidential elections. And moderates, I've been writing since 2016, we had this debate over and over and over again. Moderates have never actually offered an explanation as to why that happened or to sort of defend moderation from that electoral record. It's as though it's as though like the reason why Democrats are losing is actually because they keep trying to run the squad in Nebraska and they're not trying to like it's completely.
Oh, by the way, that would be successful for the record. Like as recent evidence has shown, running the squad in Nebraska would be successful. Like it would not be an unsuccessful strategy at all. I'll take it one step further. You don't even need to go back that far to the Obama administration, where there was the same rotating villain structure that they had, Joe Lieberman and the like, right? Or the Blue Dog Coalition. Look no further than the Maggie Hassans, the Kirsten Cinemas, and the Joe Manchins of the world, that operated in the exact same way under the Biden administration, taking out what I would say was a rather ascetic agenda for what was necessary at the time, and consistently undermining it, taking out certain parts of it, and yet no one, and I mean not a single person, ever turned around and was like, "What the fuck? What are you doing? Like, can you defend this position?" And a Green senator like Kirsten Sinema was rewarded for this spectacular failure. Like basically strapping a fucking suicide vest on and imploding a bunch of the Biden administration's agenda. She was seen as a bipartisan compromiser and as a Green senator wrote this like key legislation. And I found that disgusting and also stupid. And I think it's just goes to show that they genuinely don't care. Like they only care about, business as usual politics and not necessarily accomplishing things and even winning for that matter.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, even to the extent that like, okay, so Obama did have that majority and it was like there were a lot of moderate Democrats in it, and the argument was, well, this is how you win, and these are the people that you need to actually control Congress. Well, having those people who are right wing in your caucus, as we saw with Joe Manchin in the course of Biden's term, is going to be an obstacle to you actually using that majority to do anything useful and productive, right? It's like a kind of junk food approach to politics. We're not building anything durable. You're taking this kind of path of least resistance, choosing the moderate candidates in these kind of like moderate districts and like eking out these like majorities, and not being able to use the majority to do anything. And then, by the way, after a while, those candidates get wiped out because you've been spending all that time making right-wing arguments. And voters in these districts say, well, hell, maybe I should just vote for the Republican then. Maybe if it's true that we should oppose government spending, if it's true that we should tear about the budget deficit, if it's true that we should be more social reactionary, and I'm hearing this from a Democrat, even if they're saying that, then why the hell aren't I a Republican? Like, why the hell shouldn't I take an interest in the right? I don't know, I just feel like it's so plain and obvious to me that things need to change, and that this has been a crazy strategy. And the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result, right? I mean, that's where we are. And maybe this wakes people up, maybe this doesn't. I don't know. But I feel like I've had conversations with my friends, and this mood where we're always like, oh, I hope the Democrats do this, or the Democrats should do that, or blah, blah, blah. Like at a certain point, like we need to just sort of understand that the movement has to be built outside of this party, and we can't be kind of like begging and pleading and prostrating ourselves before these people, trying to get them to see reality, when professionally they're invested in not seeing things differently. If you are a Democratic consultant and your thing is moderation and your thing has been helping candidates position themselves as moderates, you have an interest in keeping the party exactly where it is, because that's how you make money, if you're a donor that wants to keep their taxes low and doesn't want regulatory scrutiny, you're going to fund Democrats, you're going to fund outlets, and you're going to fund people who are going to try to keep the party in the same place, right? They have to be forced by an actual popular majority of people to change the way they think about politics. It's not going to be people making arguments that are right, just sort of in the abstract. The left has to build enough power that is listened to by force. That's the only thing that's going to change anything.
Yeah. No, absolutely. This is why I always talk about like developing outside power, ensuring that like the union movement is not like growing, and not even like union interests that are completely aligned with the Democratic Party, because some unions do operate as like basically loyal servants of the party, given the leadership structure. Like one example that comes to mind is I think like the Culinary Union in Nevada, both with its early attacks against Bernie Sanders in the primary, but also like the Culinary Union was basically used as like the door knocking operation for the Kamala Harris campaign, this entire race. And it's kind of crazy because like there's a shit ton of people in the Nevada Culinary Union who have immediate undocumented family members. 1 in 15 in this country is living in a mixed status household, and the Kamala Harris campaign without offering any concessions whatsoever to the membership, with the exception, I guess, of once mentioning that she would raise the minimum wage, and also, famously said she would do a no tax on tips policy. Or not,
Yeah.
sorry, didn't say that she would raise the minimum wage. I apologize. She said that she would ensure that there was no, what's it called? The wage, that sub minimum wage. She would eliminate the sub minimum wage to ensure that like people would have to get minimum wage and then also be tipped on top of that. And that she would eliminate tax on tips. So outside of that, like, what kind of concessions do you offer to that union at all? And then they went and door knocked for her the entire race. And I feel like the American Union movement is like also somewhat powerless. And there is no there's no momentum, there's no motion. But I don't know. Sean Fain has said that he wants to do a general strike in 2028 and is trying to align people's contracts deliberately for that time frame. I don't know how promising that is, and I also do think that they would probably kill him before that happened, but who knows? I can't really see any way out of this though. Like, have you seen anything that is promising in terms of the Democratic Party potentially looking at this autopsy and moving in a positive direction?
No. I think I've been surprised by the extent to which over the past couple of days, we're seeing like these stories, people are kind of backbiting and leaking to the press now. But like in the immediate aftermath, being online felt like it was just like progressives and the left, just kind of like destroying everything. And you weren't hearing from the consultants as much. You weren't hearing from Democratic leaders. Like Kamala herself didn't make a concession speech until what was it, like 4 p.m. on Friday.
Yeah,
I think people were kind of in this.
She skipped the Howard speech she was supposed to give, which was crazy. It was
That's
like
right.
a big fuck you.
I think the initial response was just this kind of like stunned silence, where I think that people had understood. Maybe the Selzer poll made people a little bit more optimistic than they had any right to be. But I think that I don't know. I felt like people were more surprised than they should have been. It didn't have an immediate response, and I think people are only now kind of picking up the pieces. But I've not seen any real indication from Democratic insiders, official Democratic Party representatives, leaders in the party that there's going to be any kind of organized rethinking of what they do now. Maybe that changes. It's still early, but again, like irrespective of what they decide, I don't think we should just sit on our hands and kind of like wait and hope that they've finally seen the light. Maybe they come to a different place. I think that maybe losing in this way pulls the scales off of some people's eyes. Maybe, but I don't think that we should pin our hopes to that. I think we have to start speaking to people in this country directly as the left with our own vision, our own policy perspectives, our own kind of understanding of what this country could be about, and just go from there. Which is exactly, and I've made this point over and over and over again over the last several years. That is exactly what the American conservative movement did, right? They didn't just wait for the Republican Party to sort of move to the right and beg and plead with people to adopt more right-wing positions. They built a movement. They built institutions outside the GOP.
Well, to be fair, they did have billionaire backing, so
they did have
structurally
money.
Different.
It's structurally different, but I think that we have more people on our side. And that's what we have to do. Now, they had more money, sure, but like I don't see what the alternative is. I think that kind of outsider approach to politics is going to pay off. More than just hoping that we write the articles that make sense and Democrats will read them and they're like, oh, maybe the way I've done politics for the last 25 years doesn't make any sense. I've tried that. We've all tried that, and it hasn't worked. And maybe it's a little bit different now. But I don't think the real power is going to come from doing that. I think we have to try to build it on our own.
How do we take over the role of David Shore? How do we trap him into a room and then we just like communicate with the Democratic Party as though we are David Shore, and we reinvent popularism to be just populism?
Well, it's going to take a lot of ketamine, I think, if the reports are accurate. But I don't know. I just I don't know. I don't think it's I don't know if it's a matter of positioning ourselves in that kind of way. Like I think that we just have to sort of go out into the country and start winning races. Don't make any arguments to Democrats about this is what you should do to win this way or that way. Just in different communities in this country, start with locally, at the state level. Just do what you can to start winning on a progressive agenda. Find out what the arguments are that work. Be curious and think creatively about how to message as leftists. Don't just assume that. And I think this is going to be difficult for people to hear, but like if it were just a matter of just like having the right policy positions and like having the right perspective on the economy and like having the right perspective of capitalism and just telling people that, we would have already won. Like there are all of these, I think, barriers to convince people that we're worth listening to and we're worth investing their hopes in, that we have to think about overcoming. I don't have all the answers, but I think it's ultimately going to be demonstrating to people, a matter of demonstrating to people that we can win by winning. That's really all there is to it.
Yeah.
I don't think logic and reason is going to work. I don't think reason is going to work. I think the thing that works is power and building it, and forcing people to acknowledge you as a constituency that matters.
So your solution is not to get like Podjohn's politics, but with Hasan Piker aesthetics and flood the market with a bunch of liberals.
Not growing like a liberal Joe Rogan in a vat. I mean, I think that there there are benefits. I think we can also think too about like how we reach more people who aren't plugged into traditional media, and that's an important part of the story, obviously. But it's really not purely a messaging thing. I think that you have to go into districts and go into communities and actually start winning elections. And that's partially messaging, but it's also organizing. It's honing in on the issues that matter in those particular communities. And I don't know. I don't have I don't have the kind of overarching solution here, but I don't think we're served by thinking of this as purely a problem of communication and argument making, and I don't know. It's not really, I think, what building power is going to be about fundamentally.
Okay. Are there any any final notes that you would like to bring up that I might have missed here? Because we've been running the autopsy for the past couple of days, and I feel like I am almost like responsible because there aren't really a lot of voices out there. Like everything that I've seen from mainstream media is like incredible. Like every single outlet, I think, is deliberately lying because of consultant class people from Obama world, from Hillary world, that are desperately trying to hold on to this like obviously dead idea of third way neoliberalism and like attack to the center moderation. And it has failed yet again and has opened up the floodgates of American fascism. So now they have to be like, no, you don't understand. It's the wokeness that tanked this campaign. It's actually AOC that tanked this campaign. AOC's DNC speech is something I heard that tanked the campaign.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I'll say here to leave off is you're hearing that message about moderation being the answer. I think one of the things that's interesting to me is that you're also hearing people in the media, in Democratic policy circles saying, well, I think we should just give up on America. Like, I think what actually happened here is America is irredeemably broken and evil and racist, and that's really all there is to it. And there's no messaging approach, not moderation, not going to the left. There's nothing we can do. Like this is what the American people wanted. They like Donald Trump, and they deserve what they're going to get. And that shit has got to stop. Like that is not the way to engage this moment. And I think that we on the left have to be really serious about rejecting that loudly. We're going to hear all of this blue exit stuff again in the next couple of months. I guarantee you. The stuff about a national divorce and, the rest of Americans live in like dumb fuckistan and whatever. Like we have to, if we care about democracy as much as Democrats said they did and pretended they did, and that, if we really care about what that word means, I understand that it's not easy. And there are points at which most American people, many American people, can make decisions that we don't like. But you have to engage them, and you have to make arguments to them in the pursuit of winning power that's going to improve the lives of all Americans, even Americans that you don't like. right? And it's like a very simple idea, but I see so many people, and frankly, people on the left too, kind of get into this place of, oh, everyone's stupid or everyone's evil, and that's just the way it is, and I just that's not going to cut it. That's not going to cut it. We can't allow ourselves that kind of nihilism. Um, this was a winnable election. You have this pattern of incumbents all around the world. People have said are doing badly. I think that's true, but like I do think this was a winnable election. I do think that there is room to craft a left-wing majority in this country. And if you don't believe that, you should get out of politics. If you don't believe that, then you have no business doing this work. There's no point to it. You should do something else.
No,
I believe that. If it's dumb and if it's not true, whatever, we'll find it out. But I'm going to keep fighting. I'm going to keep working, and that's all there is to do it. Like I'm not going
absolutely.
to sit here and let fucking immigrants get sent to camps. I'm not going to sit here and let the climate crisis upend civilization without a fight. No, like I'm going to do everything I can to win a durable majority, to craft a durable majority in this country, and I'm not going to give up on this country. Period.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's all I wanted to say.
No, that was a fantastic take, and I 100% agree with it. It is so goddamn annoying seeing Democratic consultants be like, America's an irredeemable, racist, sexist shithole. And it's like, there is some truth to that for sure. But you can't say that. Okay. Other people can. Like, I see anonymous accounts being like, we're going to do a sex strike on men or whatever. And then, they want to potentially do like a 4B movement, but in the United States of America. And that aside, like that's one thing, right? Those are people who are understandably angry and responding to the real momentum that, like, especially in their immediate circles, like on Twitter and whatnot, that they're responding to what they're seeing. But if you're a consultant, you can't ever fucking say that. Like, that's the entire purpose, is to make sure that those guys who might even have those opinions do not lean into that and instead vote for you. So fucking stupid.
Anyway, that's all I've got.
Where can people find you, Osita?
Nwanevu.com, just my first name, my last name.com. I'm at the New Republic and the Guardian as well. Also, I have a book coming out next year on democracy, a fuller, I think, more radical, more ambitious conception of what it means and what it can do, and why we shouldn't give up on it. So look for that, I guess, the summer of next year too.
Hell yeah. All right. Osita Nwanevu, everybody, thank you so much for coming on. This was fantastic.
Awesome.
Bye.
Thank you for having me.
All right. Osita Nwanevu, everybody. Love this dude. The anger and apathy from leftist progressive liberals, whatever, so frustrating. Like, fight for yourselves to try and win. Yeah, I mean, that's real leftism.